Hey everyone, hope you've been doing well. Sorry we haven't been able to post videos over the last week and a half. I don't know how you've been doing, but some of our friends or people around us have been really struggling during this time of staying at home and the stresses related to coronavirus. So we've been dealing with a lot. Our family personally is doing well, but the things we've had to deal with have really taken its toll on us emotionally. So now we're finally getting back our breath and getting back our emotional stamina again. So I hope that you haven't forgotten the few things that we've talked about, especially related to restoration and how when something is restored, it's actually brought back to its true state of beauty, that it's a bringing back of beauty into someone's life, into an object, and that's what God does when he restores our hearts. Also, he redeemed us. He bought us back, or he paid the price so that we could be free. And all of these things that we'll be looking at are key to understanding what a relationship with God is like and helping us have the right perspective and hopefully appreciation of a relationship with God. Today we're going to look at the idea or the concept of reconciliation. I don't know what you think of when you imagine reconciliation, but two things that I think of are one within relationships, but also outside of relationships. It's when things just seem to fit together. For example, truth or facts can be reconciled. They can fit together. And if there's not a matching of facts or truths, then they do not reconcile like they're supposed to. In a relationship, when the relationship is broken and it's not put back together yet, there's a need for reconciliation. Now, for example, if I had these two pieces of wood, but they were not broken, but it was two separate pieces of wood that were broken on their own independently, they are not going to fit back together. They just naturally don't go there. Now, some relationships we should probably cut off, and maybe during this time of staying at home and the coronavirus, maybe it has helped you to separate from some relationships that were not healthy. And there's other relationships, though, that we need to work on. There's other relationships where there's been damage done, where there's pain, where there's unresolved conflict. And we need to reconcile that. Now, keep in mind, a relationship involves two people. There's always two sides. And if one person is willing to try to mend the relationship or put it back together, but the other isn't, there just won't be reconciliation. Now, if we happen to have one piece of wood and it happened to break, this is going to be the only match that it can have. So even though it's been broken, even though it's been damaged, even though it's jagged, this piece is designed for this piece, that when I could put them back together in just the right way, it will actually look whole again. That when your bones break, as soon as your bone is set, it will begin to naturally heal when it is in the right place. If it's not set properly and it begins to heal, the bone will actually need to be broken again so that it can heal properly, because where the break happens is where the mend needs to happen. But you can't take one piece of a broken board and get a completely different board and hope that you can reconcile or put them back together. Now, the same is true in a relationship with God, is that when we fall away, when we go our own way, when sin entered the world, our relationship with God that used to be perfect was broken. Now, both sides need to work to reconcile or to fix or mend the relationship, to put it back together, to allow it to fit. Now, God's done everything he needs to do to reconcile us through the life of Jesus and through Jesus' sacrifice. And we'll find out that really it takes us wanting to be reconciled to God to be put back together and to be made whole again, as God intended. I want to read for us a few verses out of the book of 2 Corinthians. Paul writes this to the church and the followers of Jesus in Corinth. He says, God brought us back to himself through Christ's death on the cross, and he gave us the task of bringing others back to him through Christ. Now, God was bringing the world back to himself through Christ. He didn't hold people's sin against them. God had trusted us with the message that people may be brought back to him. So we're actually Christ's messengers. It's as if God were making his appeal to people through us. That really what reconciliation is showing that God did everything on his side to make it possible for us to be brought back. Now, everything is ready to fit together because of what God did through the life of Jesus. And Paul goes on to say this. This is what Christ wants us to beg you to do, to come back to God, or to be reconciled to God. Christ was sinless, but God made him become sin for us so that we could be made right with God because of what Christ has done. So the reconciliation that happened was strictly based on what Jesus did, on him being sinless, but at the same time offering his life for us. So God did everything that he needed to do to be reconciled. But Paul helps us see that it really lies within us because relationships involve two people. Relationships involve two sides. If only one side is willing to work it out or reconcile, that relationship together will never be reconciled. But Paul said this, come back to God. And it helps us see that it's a choice, that we have the freedom to not come back to God. Or we have the freedom to accept what Jesus did and to be reconciled, because the only peace that this will go to is this peace. Every other peace is just not going to quite make it. Even if I do everything I can to cut it and to sand it and to shape it, the most natural piece for this to be united with again is this one that it originally broke off of. The same is true of God. We could try many other things to reconcile the hurt, the pain, the brokenness, the desires that we have to become something, the dreams that we might have of wanting to find contentment, wanting to find peace. And we keep trying to reconcile those longings, reconcile that brokenness, reconcile what it truly means to be human with the wrong peace. Only when we become aware that God already did everything on his part. He already sent Jesus. Jesus already paid the price for us. And that is where our peace is going to fit. That is where we will truly be reconciled. Love is what drives reconciliation. It's in a relationship, one of the facts is that love will never retaliate. Even when there is pain, even when there is hurt, love always seeks reconciliation. And because Christ is love, is because God sent him based on love. And everything Jesus did was based on that love. And because Christ is motivated by love, he doesn't retaliate, and God doesn't retaliate, but he looks down and he sees how much he loves us, and he sees how broken we are, and he realizes that the one piece we need is Jesus, and accepting what Jesus did for us. And only then can we truly be reconciled with God, because only then will we have the right pieces that will fit together. My hope and my prayer for us is that in this time of staying at home, in this time of distancing from one another, from friendships, from relationships, that it could be a time for us to step back and to reevaluate and ask ourselves, which relationships should we actually break off of? Which relationships are broken or hurt now that we need to reconcile? And how's our relationship with God? He did everything that he needs to do and that he could do to reconcile himself with us. And now Paul helps us see it's a choice when he says, be reconciled to God. Use this time, use these opportunities, use this day after day of staying at home to think about the most important relationship that we could ever have, one with God, and how he's done everything he can and he needs to do to reconcile us to him. And now it's up to us to reconcile with him. I look forward to talking to you again soon. God bless. Bye-bye.